We are recording.
We're live?
Henging with Vrand and Matt.
Hello.
Introduce yourself, Matt.
I'm Matt Stelter. I'm here talking into a microphone.
With some old guy in a crusty old garage full of junk.
Yeah, exactly.
So much rust
Mint
everywhere.
car here and a rust car here.
Now we're all talked out. We gotta start talking again.
Yeah.
What's going on, Chris?
Coffee time.
Coffee and garages. Today, Matt brought up a great topic, and we're going to call it catalog cars versus do-it-yourself cars.
Yeah.
And we're going to start with Honda Boy.
Yeah. Well, earlier we were talking about how there's kind of, there's more spectrums, but there's two main spectrums that we were just talking about. And it's the people that come from a background of building cars through catalogs versus building a car through, not knowing anything from a catalog and just doing it yourself and building pieces, welding pieces, doing all that jazz.
And
Catalogs, cars, magazines.
catalog car versus... Because catalog cars are interesting.
You should define what a catalog car is.
Catalog
That's
car,
true.
bolt-ons, you buy...
Name brand stuff.
Yeah, but there's different levels, because there's catalog cars that are all built with Megan, but they just bought the parts that people said that they needed or whatnot. Didn't... Because there's lots of ways you can look at it too, but I'm just thinking there's say catalog cars where it's the baller guy who has all the Mugen Spoon brand name stuff, but there's also catalog guys who are buying all the knockoff Chinese stuff. But there's also the you build DIY guy who looks at the Mugen catalog, figures out how to build it himself because he can't pay $500 for a strut bar and build something as good as potentially with what he has in his garage if they have the skills and ability to fab stuff. So
Very true.
there's a couple ways to go with it.
Catalog stuff, most of the parts are very well made, as far as the higher end parts that you do pay good money for. They're made at a top tier level that you can't necessarily replicate at home. So in that aspect, it does make sense to buy them.
Yeah.
Unless you're a machinist and you have access to equipment
Yeah.
to do that.
Totally.
Like if you're 18 and you have a Civic, the odds are you're not getting either of those.
No.
But once you're because a lot of people go into a line of work because it allows them to build car parts on the spare time or side, or people learn how to weld just so they can weld something up because they don't want to buy it or can't afford it. Or if you say I learned how to weld at trade school, and before I learned how to weld, I hated welding, thought it was stupid. But once I could weld, it just basically ruined my life because everything was achievable.
Oh yeah, it opens so many doors.
Yeah, it's I can ruin anything.
Yeah, that happened to me over the summer. Angel got me a welder for Christmas or whatever, and I was like, "Oh, this is sick." I didn't really use it at first, and then I started working on my bike and built a little chopper and whatnot, and it was like, "Oh man, I can do anything."
Yeah, it's a slippery slope of starting to buy stuff and I just buy stuff and cut it in half.
Yeah.
I say that to people all the time. A box will show up at my door. I'm like, sick. Open it, take it in the garage. Grinder comes out. It's brand new name brand part. Cut it in half.
Yeah.
That's the first thing I do because nothing fits on my cars. So when that's another facet where it's you build a car that no one builds bolt-on parts for.
Yeah.
You are forced into that, which I didn't do intentionally by any means, but I just ended up with cars that you can't really buy parts to do what I like to do with cars. So
Yeah, exactly.
I had to build a lot of stuff, and I don't necessarily build stuff well or properly or the right way, but I make it happen.
Yeah, as long as the outcome is what you kind of intended it to be, or if it works for you.
Well, it's the age-old thing. You make the thing, and then it's the next day you think of how to make it better already.
Sure.
And then you always
Oh
revise.
yeah, there's always I'm on what stage are you on, Bren?
Stage 3.
What stage are you? Do you have an
Titles don't
access
have
port?
stages.
What's an access port?
But I mean, there's other further defining things of a catalog car it's the Honda scene is probably the most notorious for it because
been
even
around for
almost
so long.
California in general, where you go through and buy very specific parts that are name brand, and a lot of those owners also have that in the rest of their life, where they're collectors or they have pop art like just things that are very unique and niche as it is, and those people sort of build their lives around that because they're OCD or whatever the case may be. When it comes to drift cars, and it's something different than a Honda car, because Honda cars, if they're tracked at all, and in California there's a lot of runoff places. There's not a lot of places to crash your car. So spending that money, you feel like you're not going to lose your investment by crashing it. And there's always a weird market for those parts where they don't really depreciate over time. You can always sort of get your money back because that market dictates that. If you have something like a Megan parts, which are shelf life of a couple of years, if that, due to the build quality, you're not going to be looking like, oh, I need that Megan tow arm in the back of this car, because it's just simply a tow arm that adjusts, up and down to look at your alignment. But I mean, you look at, I think that's almost dictated as to where you live, because if you're in a track or a city that there's no way for you to damage the car if you're going to use it for motorsports, you don't feel bad, abusing your car, because you're like, the high likelihood of me damaging my 17 by 9 zero offset TE37s and original bronze with original stickers is highly unlikely. Or they have such notoriety as a driver or person that they can get their money back, where I've been seeing used car parts selling for more than new car parts due to the owner who owned them and the history that comes from behind them. It's sort of like
Watanabes are like that.
Yeah, Watanabes are just like that too, where they're very poorly made when you see them in person, but because of the name you want them for, and that's just sort of a human condition as it is.
Yeah, and you can still buy them new, but for some reason the used ones are more expensive.
Yeah, they're cheaper to get brand new from the factory.
Yes and no. There's
yeah,
I'm not going to talk about that.
It's equal but not equal.
Yeah.
In a certain sense, but and then drifting S13s, not being a S13 guy, but 10 years ago, if you were into drifting and you had an S13, basically you bought X coilovers with X spring rate and X LSD, and then
because it was kind
back
of all
then knuckles
out.
were kind of a new thing, but
knuckles were the thing way back when the JDM stuff was the only option.
Yeah, 10 years ago, like cut knuckles, it was like, whose knuckles are you running?
Why are you cutting things that are OEM? What are you doing that?
What are you doing? Yeah, but if you basically wanted to drift, you just put had a list. Like, I have a checklist. If I have an 8.6
Kaz LSD, 10 HEs, and then some 15s of some description, meshies likely.
Yeah.
That was when I got into cars. It was either JDM stuff, or that was it. There was no China stuff yet.
Yeah.
Whether the JDM stuff was made in China or not is
irrelevant.
its own question. Yeah. But it was either JDM or there was no rotas.
As far as we knew, it came from Japan, and that was the only option.
That's the only option.
Yeah.
I never grew up in that stage, unfortunately.
Yeah, back then there was like,
good and bad.
You could
it's
only
so expensive.
Yeah, if there was someone with a pipeline to Japan, you lucked out and got some stuff, but it was never. It was cheaper, but it was never cheap. It always seemed expensive. But yeah, like an 8.6, you got Tokiko HTS's
technical toy tunings things.
No T3 stuff, but Tokiko, because T3 didn't even exist way back then. They didn't make drift parts. They made parts for old Corollas. But like, if you were a Corolla guy, you got HTS dampers and some 8 and 6 kg spring rate front and rear, and probably RCAs and battle version spacers, because Alex was making Corolla spacers a billion years ago for a steering angle. And then like if I have a Corolla, I won't even try to drift it until I have either a welded or an LSD, some kind of shocks and some steering angle. And then even then, like, my list is pretty long, and depending on how serious I want to be with the Corolla, but I will probably never have another 8.6 because they're too expensive to justify now.
They are.
Yeah, like you can buy an Altezza Although
Yeah.
Altezza prices,
They're gonna go up.
they
They're
are. They
already
have
going
gone up.
Yeah.
Like what I got 5 years ago versus what you can get today for the same price is pretty different.
Yeah. I remember you could find kind of a trash one for around $3,000 or whatever.
Yeah.
Even cheaper, maybe.
Easy peasy, yeah. You can get garbage.
And now you can
And
get
now-
garbage for fucking $6,000.
Now it's like you can get a rolled car
What?
for $5,000.
Yeah.
Well, that's its own topic in
It
itself
is.
because 240s, which were $5,000 10
Yeah.
year ago,
But the Altezza is an unloved car and nobody cares because
But
it
it's
doesn't
green-
have a
it's-
JZ.
but it's got a cult following with a Beams motor because how popular
because
the
they
Beams
created
motor
a
is.
goddamn monster and now I can't even get a new motor.
I really like the old, the late 90s or early 2000s Japanese race series with EK9s, Civics, and Altezzas.
Yeah.
I guess it was like a 4-cylinder, high horsepower series. I don't know what it was, but
JGT, there's GTC 300 and the 500.
yeah.
And both, well, the 300 I think was Altezza's, and the JGTC 500, they had a Supra with the beams in it that made 500 horsepower
Really?
because it had 50-50 weight distribution and it raced against the GTRs,
Ah, okay.
and that's where the
That's
Did
interesting.
you
The
learn that in
beams
the
really
Super
came
Street as
from.
well with the top secret? I think it was like it was golden color. It was wide.
yes,
That's when I learned
The
about
Supra?
that. Yeah.
I don't know how or why, but I know that the Supra was Beam's engine
Yep.
from various internet pictures and stuff because and the reasoning was that it had 50-50 weight distribution versus the GTR. GTR is all-wheel drive. They're 500 horsepower because that's the name of the series, so they're kind of limited, but the GTR is all-wheel drive and insanely front-heavy and understeer prone, whereas the Supra with the Beams 4-cylinder turboed in it was 50-50 and way lighter overall.
I was going to say you could probably drop a lot of pounds.
Same horsepower but perfect balance.
Yeah.
Didn't understeer like a cow, so like later in the race when the GTR is struggling, the Supra is just like whoop, 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 whoop.
Yeah.
I still got lots of front tire.
Yeah.
So they were giant killing with that, and it's hilarious to think of
That
a Supra,
Yeah.
the legendary
Yeah.
2JZ, but instead it's got a Beams 3S in it,
It's a good looking car.
and that's
That
where
was
the
top secret.
VVTi stuff really was used, was to make huge power and torque
Yeah.
in a 4-cylinder 2-liter engine
But
in
you have
that
to
class.
step back as well. That Japan has whatever car you have, there's going to be a one make race
Yeah,
or
which
a
is amazing.
like following of some description in some track somewhere, which is what we're talking about, the Binky, the bargain racement
Yeah.
vehicle, which is
Like,
to
what
have a car that is well strictly enforced, but you just simply you buy the parts, you put them on, you go race together.
Yeah.
Whoever's the better driver wins, and it's
I
just
like-
something fun to do.
I like that series because it's both
great.
like basically catalog and do it yourself.
Yeah, and we have similar. There's the Echo Cup in Quebec, so there's like a Toyota Echo hatch, and it was you run X parts. They do the same thing in Quebec.
Yeah.
Doesn't happen so much outside of the eastern part of Canada for series races, just because racetracks and population doesn't allow motorsports in the rest of Canada. Weird, but yes, catalog. Let's get back to catalogs. Catalog cars and the
It's almost auto fashion
Personalities.
though too.
Oh, it is.
And it's defined as auto fashion cars,
Yeah,
which
like-
are all show cars
Well,
with catalog
Like
parts.
exterior stuff.
catalog guy over here with his fashion pants on.
My pants got two zippers.
What brand are they,
I
bro?
have no idea.
Oh,
Amy
come
buys
on,
me-
you gotta know that.
Amy buys me pants.
Oh.
A funny thing that
My
I
mom
thought
bought me
of-
this shirt. It says Pack Wolf. I think she paid way too much for it on a ferry.
My mom does the same thing. You like wolves, don't you? Here you go.
A funny thing what I thought of was when I was Civic boy, young Civic boy. I always wanted a rear-wheel drive car. I always wanted to try drifting and whatnot. And the opportunity came up to trade my CRX for a piece of shit clapped out 8.6. And I was like, fuck yeah. So I did that. And I remember I didn't look into it at all. I thought it was just like the coolest thing to do. So after I got this car, I looked into how to lower it and how to basically do performance stuff to it.
Like, this thing is garbage.
Well, that too. It was.
Why is everything so expensive?
It was Bondo.
This garb was garbage.
It was Bondo King, yeah. But no, I was like, oh, I have to cut and weld my own coilovers like in the front.
Yeah. Like, what?
How am I? I didn't know anybody at the time that could like weld anything, and I was like, oh man, like I'm gonna have to go to like Greens or some custom place to do
And
this.
they're just
like,
gonna laugh you out of the door.
yeah,
like,
exactly.
no, we're
Spend
not
all this
doing
money,
that.
and I had no resources, and I was like, oh man, like this is making me want to give up on it right away. And then just a few more other things, I was like, this is definitely one of the, like classified as, I guess, a do-it-yourself car. I was like, I can't do this right now. I don't have the resources to. So I went back to Civics after that.
Yeah. And luckily now.
Bought my way through.
Luckily, is it luckily? Some people would say luckily now you can buy many more different options for 8.6s. There's
now it's hilariously easy.
Yeah, now you can build an 8.6 catalog car, but like 15 years ago trying to build
not
an 8.6.
Not even 15 years ago.
I know, but 15 years ago.
Oh yeah, no.
Like trying to build an 8.6, like how the hell do you get the front low enough without it just having no travel?
Yeah.
Like, but even in today's age where everything's available, you still do it incorrectly and droop springs instead of having a captive, and it's just a learning curve too. And the difference of a DIYer is that, not saying they'll all do that, but you see how it works to see how it works. Not you bolt this on and then it just works that way because it was made this way, and that can be a huge thing too. Like I didn't learn how to do things DIY until I met Warren, and he started messing around with Toyota things, which is honestly a Toyota thing because the first car I cut and ground was the Supra, and nothing was made for that car, so I
it's
adapted.
Even worse than an 8.6. I feel
but like a few months after I finished the coilover thing with mine, Stance made some, which I was in talks with Stance about it, and anyways, it just didn't work out that way. But whatever, it was an enjoyable experience, and I'm fortunate I have someone in my life like Warren who can help in a lot of those ways.
Yeah. I started with a garbage welder, like flux core, no gas.
That's what I have right now.
It's 110. Like
it's fun.
Terrible and awesome. Like you can lay some good beads.
Yeah, you can.
Like I have a Canadian Tire, like 110 flux core.
Yeah.
I have a 110 gas welder now, but I don't do anything heavy or crazy. But just people are intimidated by and or scared of making stuff themselves. Until like once you make the first thing though, like I don't know. Let's go back in time to before I had a rear-wheel drive car, and I had a Mercury Lynx 4-speed, which is a Ford Escort essentially, but like base. So it's 4-speed. It's not even 5 speeds, like 1.6 front-wheel drive, 85 or 86 car, and I farted around with it a little bit. My dad actually got it, and then I got it from my dad, and it had no muffler on it, and it was the rally car, so it was like this loud, obnoxious, terrible, junky car, nice brown vinyl interior, but it had no muffler, so it was sick all over the place. And at some point I broke it pretty bad. It started knocking really bad, and I had to put 2050 oil in it, and it was getting really, really, really bad. But I was just limping it to and from work at that point, and putting 2050 oil in it. So basically, this car is just to get me to work for the next 3 weeks till I can get a new thing. And at that point, when the car didn't matter anymore, it was like, this car is fully disposable because the other car is already in the works. Like I've got money to pay for a new car. It's just, let's make this happen. It became an experiment. So I actually just took the springs out. Like I went to Canadian Tire, rented a spring compressor.
I've definitely had that.
Just took the springs right out, put the struts back in with no spring.
Yeah.
the back they're separate. So it was just like unbolt the bottom, spring falls out, bolt the shock back up, put it on the ground. No springs at all, just riding on the bump stops on the shocks.
Yeah.
And it was
dragging around
amazingly ridiculous. So I drove it like that, basically like 5-10K both way, like each way to and from work for
What?
probably a week with like no springs.
You actually
And
drove it,
The
eh?
car wouldn't even rev over 2K at that point. Like I had a tack because it was a base model, so I put this big fat tack on the dash, and it wouldn't even free rev to 2,000 RPM. It was knocking so bad. So I'm just like, it's like, and at that point, like after doing that to
That's
the
the most
car,
fun.
it was like, dude, I can do anything.
Oh yeah.
Like I can destroy any car. Because before that you're kind of tentative, like, oh, I don't know, I can. It's like $200 to buy springs. I gotta make sure I get the right springs. And then it's like, well, the only company that makes lowering springs for my car is this and this, and I gotta order them from Mopac, and those guys are so annoying to deal with.
Nothing matters.
And there was no internet, and it was like trying to get parts was so weird. And it also, I make my life difficult by having an Escort, because after I had the Lynx blew up, I got an Escort GT because that's the next step, right?
Yeah.
If you're gonna have a Rabbit, then you get a GTI.
Yeah.
If you have an Escort base model, you gotta get a GTI or a GT, I guess it was. So yeah, after the Lynx experience and like taking springs out and like cutting mufflers off and putting a tack in it, like all this stuff that I'd never done before, was just like, after that it's like, oh yeah, I can do anything. Like, I want more camber on this Escort. How do I make camber? Okay, it's got CVs, they're like accordions. I can like cut holes and slot holes and stuff, and so I'm just like out there with a drill, like pushing sideways on a drill bit, ovaling holes. Just hacking the shit out of this poor car. But it was so good. And I probably had my Escort, I like rebuilt an engine, like did everything. The Escort was like the beginning. I didn't weld yet, but everything that I could do without welding, I pretty much had done to that Escort. Rebuilt motors, just front wheel drive.
Front wheel, yeah.
But super funny car. But yeah, most of what I learned pre-welding, almost everything else, motor swaps and like doing clutches and all that stuff, I did on my Escort, which is like where it all started, which is hilarious.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a soft spot for Escorts. The rear-wheel drive Escort is why I got a Corolla, a 1972 Corolla, because it looked almost identical. When I walked by one in an alley, and I was like, holy shit, that's an Escort.
Well, they almost have the same chassis.
Oh my god, they're identical. Mark 1 Escort, Mark 1 Corolla, so similar.
Well, what about Mark II Escorts? And
Mark 2 is
same as
still
8.6?
leaf spring. It's very 860.
Yeah.
Because an 8.6 is a copy, as usual, Japan is just a copy of England.
Yeah.
So Mark 2 Escort and Mark 1 like 8.6 TE72 stuff, very, very similar.
Mm-hmm.
I think Mark 2 Escort is still leaf spring, but most of them get 4-linked.
You can tell the way they drive too.
And then
all the
BDA,
old-
like the engine itself,
rally
like a BDA Ford motor is a 4AG. 4AG is just like, how can we make this motor reliable?
Yeah. Exactly.
So,
It's a Japanese way.
like the cam routing, like if you look at the cam belt on a BDA and a 4AG, they're identical. It's so close. It's like, okay, they just fully copied that.
I wonder if they share same belt.
Probably not, different sizes and stuff, but yeah. And then the beams is just an extra big 4AG. But yeah, that's, I think you have to like go through that phase of like, not desperation, but like,
You gotta have a hack phase.
like where nothing matters.
No,
and you're just
totally.
like, I can do whatever I want to this car because it doesn't matter anymore. I don't have to. It doesn't have to get me to work.
Yeah.
It doesn't owe me anything. This car is basically trash, and like it blew up like when I was driving it, and it just like and engine parts all over the place, and it was awesomely hilarious because I had already secured the next thing, so it didn't matter, and it was just amazingly funny, and like we're just dying laughing, me and my buddy that was with me when it blew. It just, the funnest thing in the world is blowing an engine up leisurely.
Yeah.
Like it just started revving all of a sudden. It was like, yeah, it's fixed.
Yeah, everybody's got to go through that ricer phase.
But it's so funny.
Well, Ricer's different than Hack.
Well,
Yeah, the hack
Ricer's
is
still like, but
super
Ricer's low
liberating.
quality or low standard. I want to buy something and just put it on my car. That's sort of a Ricer mentality.
yeah, it's more.
It's a
buying
weekend
things.
job or day job.
Yeah,
Type thing.
but the hack.
Hack job is
Well,
something a little bit different.
What is? Because what would you call?
They are related.
What
in
would
a
you
way.
call that? Lynx. Like it is hack, but it's also. It
To
was
me, it's
just
a Duke
full
of Soup.
entertainment at that point.
It's
Duke
just
of
not.
Soup.
It's just not carrying that
Just
much.
yeah,
but
just
carrying.
ain't care. Like
It's a rednecky thing. Almost.
It's carrying.
Yeah.
It's not
yeah,
carrying to
like
care.
field car level, like where you're
Yeah.
just you have a thing to go run into stuff, which is hilarious. it's because you just don't care.
It's interesting you say that because like 4AG Garage, the YouTube channel, amazing. It's someone who has that's a guy who has a Helix and I think it's a Starlet or something. Anyways, 2 4AG power vehicles. He put a 4AG in his Hilux, turbo it. Essentially, it's Warren in Australia in a way where he just makes his own intake manifold, makes his own exhaust manifold, bolts a turbo to it. Yeah. Very cool, and he has a dyno.
Did you just do a burnout in a lawn for like the longest time?
Yeah, and the
like crazy noises.
The notoriety of that one is him pegging limiter in his truck as NA, and going, and then having massive rooster tails. It's white with a flat deck bed. Yeah, a hilarious thing. But he has a dyno at his house, or has free access to this dyno. And we'll just do dyno sessions to try it.
He did all the different trumpet lengths.
Yeah, he did trumpet lengths, and he did like a road cone.
Yeah,
and so he just kept changing it. And he's like, "Look, I realize that it's not, the trumpets aren't calibrated for this. We're just simply trying different lengths of this." Yeah. He's very honest with what he's doing, and it's my point is that someone who's has access to a field where you can road drive a vehicle, but not on the road on your own property. This happens in Ireland and in the UK as well, where you have giant fields and farm vehicles. Happens in Australia and New Zealand a lot. Is that you have the freedom to experiment without repercussions. So when you live in a city though, and it's also hard for insurance. So like if you get a vehicle inspection, I would think that in prairie provinces where you have access to area to mess around with a car to see what would happen.
When my car was carved and I would tune it, you drive out of the city, just sneak out of the city limits, and then you have endless straight roads to tune carbs on. Just, then shut it off and check your plugs, and then do another full throttle rip and like just checking plugs as carb tuning, like pre-wideband. It's hilarious because you just have endless straight road. You find one with a nice little grade, so you're going uphill a bit, extra loaded, and just get it into third, and then just do a full throttle pull and shut it off and check your plugs.
But I mean, like, creativity is born from no limits. So if you are able to do something wild and potentially unsafe to a vehicle to see how it would function,
it's all about death.
But if you're on the road and your wheel lets go, or suspension falls apart or tears up from your suspension, you could potentially injure someone else. It becomes something different where you're like, I don't want to have that financial responsibility and also moral responsibility to hurt someone. But in the same token, like that's where some guys will just build track cars and then test them at the track, spend all day at the track fixing their car because it's broken because they tried something new. And it's almost punishing in that way, where you don't street drive your car to see how it reacts in a regular situation to extreme situations. And that's that comes into the conversation of simple seat time car versus building a car purpose built for something. But once again, catalog cars that's where show cars come in, where you buy certain parts, and the SEMA cars and
the roll call, all your part listed stickers on your window or your door.
That's a very specific period in time, but
there's still people doing it though. It's still pretty popular.
Everything's a thing.
But you can look at that. That's also very specific to certain cities too, like Hawaii. If you think of Hawaii, what do you think of?
Old Toyotas and pickup trucks with sweet stretch tires with their pounce stance.
So what do you think of Hawaii when I say Hawaii car culture? What do you think of?
Everything. I think of older cars that are just immaculate condition with wide pokey wheels and stretch tires.
I like the beach trucks.
Yeah, definitely beach trucks.
2-wheel drive Toyota pickups with the stretched.
But like everything shining.
What I think of Hawaii is someone who fully restores, and there's such a mix of culture there because it's also another island thing, where and there's also a lot of Japanese popular there who've immigrated there. And then you have a lot of people who just seem to care about their cars. It's almost Japanese old hot rod culture. Where you have, it doesn't even matter what the year, and it's almost like everything is respected because someone put the time and energy into it. It's also hard to get parts in Hawaii because there's only so many cars there, and everything has to be imported, and it's very specific to what they're trying to do, as opposed to the polar opposite of Cuba, which has this many things there, and you just create something from nothing. So you have a Jeep headlight assembly, but you have a Ford Escort, and you make that headlight work for that car. It doesn't make any sense. It's like a bunch of Picasso paintings.
Yeah.
Cuba's done a lot.
Have you been to Cuba though?
I've watched the Mighty Car Mods Cuba thing.
Oh, I haven't seen that, but
And
I've been to
they're-
Cuba, and I just walked around Cuba fantasizing about all the brand new European cars that I couldn't have that they
yeah.
had.
Oh,
I'd walk down the street and be like, oh, there's a 2003 Focus with Euro bumpers. I have a 2003 Focus. I would fucking kill to have those Euro bumpers.
Mm-hmm.
But some Cuban has them.
oh.
Yeah, all the like Peugeot 206s and stuff. Being a rally guy, like
In Cuba.
Yeah,
Yeah, they have some.
the old
type
cars
of-
only come out on Sunday. Everyone else drives brand new Ladas and brand new
Weird.
Peugeots and Fords.
Watching
Euro
watching Mighty
models.
Car Mods, I was like,
I think
they
they
stopped
filter it.
They stopped allowing was the Cuba
Yeah,
import
they
ban.
don't allow American cars in anymore, so there's lots of old American cars. But there's lots of brand new Euro
Okay.
stuff. Anything from Italy or from Russia or anything left leaning, like any communist.
Well, there's something
happy
because
place.
the Mighty Car
Yeah.
Mods one was like
I
people
feel-
have cars that there's just a bunch of Picasso stuff where you have
because that's probably what they sought out. They probably landed at the airport and was like, I'm surrounded by Toyota Hiaces. This isn't the Cuba I expected. Let's go find the Cuba that we expected.
Oh,
No one talks
that's possible.
about the actual Cuba. Like, I was on resort, but I also went into Haiti and I cruised around like on my skateboard and went to weird places and did weird things as usual. But like,
that's
yeah, I was in love with all the Euro cars. I knew they were there before I went researching it a little bit, but I was just like, Peugeot 206 Escort with Euro bumpers. Like, I wonder if I could find a junkyard and get some of these and ship them home with me. Like, I was trying to figure out
that makes
stuff
me
like
be
that.
more interested in Cuba. And
It's a really weird place, and especially if you speak to Americans, they like Chelsea's mind was blown. Where in casual conversation, I was like, "Oh yeah, Cuba's not that bad. I was there. It's this and that and that." She's like, "What? You have been to Cuba?"
We all have lives outside of our
No,
regular
but
life.
she's from the U.S. There's people
Right.
don't go to Cuba. No one's allowed to go to Cuba. And if you go there, you're not allowed to leave because that's what they're told. They don't realize that it's a free country and you can leave whenever you want, and it's pretty sweet. And they don't leave because it's pretty sweet. So it's weird. I should watch the Mighty Car Mods one, but I feel like you would have to, being a tourist in Cuba and being like on a tour bus as a tourist and not having a huge budget to go like find the Cuba cars. I was personally blown away by all the cars that we don't get in Canada / North America that were just freely driving around there, and I was just like, oh my god,
That's
I
like
would
Europe,
kill to
too.
have that car. I'd kill to have that car. Like, they have all these things in Cuba that the rest of North America can't have. What is up with this?
we should be able to import them now, considering
A lot of it now, but I was in Cuba 12 years ago probably. Like, it was a long time ago, but yeah, it was pretty interesting.
Oh, that's it.
Yeah.
Definitely watch that one. We'll talk about it next time because it
Oh,
was. I just thought because
Cuba, it is cool because you would see cars, and it's hard to tell with a Lada. I just watched a James May special on the people's cars, but Lada made the same car essentially. Not Lada. Lada bought all the stampings and whatnot, but Fiat 131 I think was in production essentially from 1971 till 1999 or 2010 or something. Like, there's
That's
been
it.
billions and billions of models made. It's
Yeah.
like the Lada that we know, the shape of Lada Niva, or not Lada Niva, but
The
like
boxy
the
thing.
Lada profile that we know
Yeah.
is a Fiat 131 that's been tweaked a little bit, and it's the same for that entire time.
Mm.
So it's really weird, and the cool ass Ladas, like they had Ladas with wheels and like Chicano
Ladas
Ladas,
with wheels.
rally Chicanos, sport Ladas, like, and they're up on the oil drums, and it's like, yeah, it's
I
like
really
a
wanna
normal
drive
guy
one.
trying to fix a car. It's cool.
I'd love to drive one. I wonder how they drive.
Oh, it's
they're-
probably
if they are like
Corolla
a piece
leaf
of shit.
spring. Like, it's probably a leaf spring Corolla.
Yeah.
Like, you can't really change much. It's a leaf spring car with a steering box.
Bouncing
It's
around a
smallish.
corner.
It would probably just be a Corolla.
Yeah.
It'd be pretty fun. Nice light car with no power.
Yeah.
Hilarious.
Yeah, there's a bunch of rally ones.
Yeah, and the Russians love them for their ice drift practice, their winter practice.
Yeah. And vodka drinking in the back seat.
Yeah, they drive the wagon.
back seat, front seat,
Front
Nice.
seat. Yeah.
Yeah, front seat.
Got a
Trunk.
Cadillac.
You drive with bottle. Why
One
you
that
have?
comes with you.
You don't have bottle?
I don't know what it was. You want to go to the next topic, or do you want to keep going with this one?
We can call this one good, and we will.
We'll keep going. It's just simply
No,
name
we're
brand
gonna
versus
break it
non-name
into
brand.
viewable pieces because this is a viewable program now.
Okay, have a good night.
For those of you who don't know, you cannot watch the video of this ever.
Three guys sitting around talking about
Yeah,
stuff.
3 guys in dirty clothes in a gross old garage while the baby naps. Okay, done.
Have a good night.